White Sox, White Sox, go, go, White Sox. Let's go, 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 White.
Welcome to March's maddest and most fun Madhouse, Chicago sports podcast, Monsters of the Madhouse, brought to you by TC's World of Wonders, Budget Cars, and Serendipity Ice Cream Parlor. Tonight, friends, we wrap up a wild, historic week in Chicago sports that saw Bears GM Ryan Poles become a certified G on the NFL's most wild deal maker. Several White Sox stars saved Team USA from Team USA's World Baseball Classic hopes, and then also the Chicago Bears completely reinventing themselves for the upcoming 2023 season. Great to have you with us, friends. I'm Clee Campbell. I am joined by our resident Chicago White Sox expert, Captain Caleb James. Also, the great American football fan, the voice of the afternoon drive on Q103.1 FM in Louisville, and also 97.3 FM, The Mix in Birmingham, Alabama. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt the Coop Man Cooper. Fellas, how you doing, everyone? Great to have you guys. And fellas, let's start off with one of the great voices and one of the great talents in all of sports broadcasting. He is beginning his 32nd season as the voice of the White Sox AA affiliate, the Birmingham Barons. He has been called a one-of-a-kind, unique voice of baseball, ladies and gentlemen, that has a passion for his job that cannot be matched. That's Joe Davis of Fox Sports, talking about our guest tonight, the one and only Curt Bloom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in Curt to the Madhouse. Curt, how you doing, my friend?
Thank you very much. Beautiful introduction. I can just listen to that the rest of the half hour, then I'm on. Just keep going. Keep going.
Hey, I tell you what, it's our pleasure to have you, Curt. You are starting year number 32 with the Barons, and you didn't even blink.
Now, it happens. Sometimes I tell people it feels like it's 32 minutes.
Yeah.
It happens so quickly. I just got here. I didn't have kids. It was just my wife and I, small apartment. And then 32 years later, and you got to include a couple of championships, a Michael Jordan season, and children, grandchildren, a house, just it happens when you're in baseball, because we play every day. It goes like that. It's a grind, and the season goes like that.
Absolutely. And I know, you've said it before that you feel like Lou Gehrig with what you do, the luckiest man on the face of the earth. Are you like Matt Coop? Are you like Caleb? Are you like us fans? As you count down the days to the season opener, are you like a kid again with anticipation of a new year?
Yeah, absolutely. There is definitely that wind down period that I need after the baseball season is over, mid-September to October. You really want to just hide away and go into a cave because you just burnt your body to a crisp. January, you start getting itchy because you've done enough basketball, football, whatever it is. And then that first day of spring training, and then traditionally, for any baseball fan, that first box score, when you see names, like, wow, this is, to me, better than Christmas to see the box scores out there. And I'm like, okay, now it's time. Now you get to the point right now where you've prepped and you got ready and you're anxious because you want to get started. I want you to be talking to me 2 weeks from now and, hey, we're, 20-5, something along those lines. It's a lot easier once you get going than it is to get going.
I can imagine. Yeah, it's just the anticipation. Folks, you can follow Curt and the Barons this year at barons.com. Home opener is coming up on April 11th. Season opener, it looks like Thursday, April 6th. And this is an exciting season, Curt, for the Barons. A lot of talent coming up through this White Sox farm system. Can you kind of take our viewers come through some of the prospects you expect to really be key parts of this 2023 Barons team?
Well, we got a sneak preview, Cleet, at the end of August last year. It was a very unique experiment called Project Birmingham. It had never been done before in minor league baseball, where Chris Getz, the farm director of the White Sox, put every prospect in the entire organization in one city, and that city was Birmingham. So we got a chance to see the number one pick. Now, there's a difference between last season and last year in a sense. I don't want to get anybody confused, but not this past season, but last year, number one pick was the shortstop Colson Montgomery. He came to Birmingham. Number two pick, third baseman Wes Caff. He came to Birmingham. We got to see a guy who just is coming off a wonderful spring training, Brian Ramos, Luis Mieses, pitcher Christian Mena, catcher Adam Hackenberg. And so they all got their first taste of Double-A on August 24th, and they would ride out and spend the last 3 weeks in Birmingham. So I would say the bulk, not everyone can come back, obviously, but the bulk of that unit that came up, and just like anybody else, I read the transactions, and it said that Brian Ramos is and Jose Rodriguez have been assigned to Birmingham. So that means they're on the 40-man, they're protected, and their contracts have been assigned to us. And a guy like Rodriguez put up wonderful numbers. By the time he got hurt, he was top 5 in the league in about 10 different categories. Hurt his hamate and then missed the last month of the season. He was almost a forgotten guy because of Project Birmingham. But he'll be back. Ramos will be back. And then interesting to see what we do with Montgomery and a couple of the other outfielders, catchers, infielders. I mean, it's a lot of fun. And so the anticipation started really in late August of last year.
Yeah, and like you said, what happened on August 24th? 17 transactions, Curt, am I right, in one day? You don't see a Major League Baseball team do that at the trade deadline.
It's on my phone. I should screenshot it for you guys, but it's something that I knew would never happen again. I certainly don't want to be a part of it again. When you're in the minor leagues, and even a big league club would have had trouble doing that. But 17 transactions, and literally, I had one of the not the farm director, but one of his assistants come into my radio booth 3 times prior to the game and say, we're taking this guy on and this guy off. We're putting this guy on and this guy off. So it changed up until literally the first pitch. But 17 new players came our way. And your head was spinning. You didn't know what you were watching, who, what, where. The only thing we knew as White Sox fans was Colson Montgomery, the highly touted shortstop, was coming our way, and we got a chance to see him for the last 3 weeks. After that, so much of it was a blur. It was a lot of fun, but it was a blur too. Just getting from August 24th to the finish line going, wow, 17 guys. And I mean, the guys were constantly, if a guy pitched, he was taken off the roster the very next day and a new guy was put on.
Wow.
Yeah. How do you prepare? It's just as a broadcaster, like, how do you prepare yourself for this? Because I mean, you've been doing this a long time, so I'm sure you've experienced this in the past, and then all these years later, you got a little bit more experience with it. But at the same time, you really got to put yourself in a position, because you got to start calling the games with all these new players on and getting your info in. And so how do you go about doing that, especially for the next couple of games after that?
Matt, what you do is you play mind games. And the reason I say that is because I told myself, take a deep breath. I was in at that time my 31st year with the Barons, my 35th year overall. It's not like I haven't called a base. That being said, no, he's gone. I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah. No, he's nowhere nearly as important as you guys are. But what I told myself was, look, you've done literally 3,500, maybe 4,000 baseball games, and just take it one batter at a time. Here's Montgomery, number one pick from last year. Boom. This is what he was doing. Here's Brian Ramos. You don't let the whole thing encompass you and get out of the way. It was kind of interesting too. A side story to that is the first team that we played once all the guys came up was Chattanooga and the Cincinnati Reds. And I mention that because they're going to have 5, 7, 8, 9 guys off of that team that will also be in the big leagues. It was kind of interesting because they were the talk of the Southern League in the second half. This guy by the name of Ellie De La Cruz and others. But all of a sudden they were forgotten guys because we, the Barons, became the story. And so answering your question again, Matt, is just take a deep breath and go, it's just like again, you're about to do a shift in New York, hey, look, I've done a shift 1,000 times before this one. Okay. And that's the way I looked at it. That's the way I approached it.
Yeah, it's like you got to rely on the fundamentals, even if it's game series or the World Series.
Yeah.
It's the fundamentals that got you there.
Back to the basics. What good is it if I'm talking about all these names and I forgot to tell you ground ball to third?
Right.
How many outs? What's the score?
Curt, I would love to see I'd love to see your box score. I would love to see your score sheet for that game when you were keeping score. It had to be, I would imagine, one of the craziest games, that first game after the project started, in terms of all the substitutions that were coming in and out.
Well, it was the roster that you would want to see. And my scorecard has the active players. Okay. Right. And we're allowed to have 26, I believe, in AA. So all I needed was 26 names. But the problem was the next day, 3 in, 3 out. The next day after that, 2 up, 2 down, 3 in, 3 out. And it was constant. So the roster, every single day, and true, this is a true story, from August 24th through the last game of the season, the roster changed every single day. And that's something, again, you don't typically see. So instead of my scorecard, which only has 26 guys locked in, the roster and more importantly, the transaction page, you go look at the Barons media note, and the transaction page was like the yellow pages.
I can imagine. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking with Curt Bloom, the voice of the Birmingham Barons, ladies and gentlemen. And a side note here, folks, Curt's talking about the future White Sox stars. You're going to be seeing Colson Montgomery. You're going to be seeing Oscar Colas, Brian Ramos, Noah Schulte. You're going to be seeing them at 35th and Shields down the line someday. And what better way to do that by making sure you get their jersey? You can find all your favorite current White Sox and Bears stars at TC's World of Wonders. Whatever your sports memorabilia dream in 2023, make it come through at TC. Make it come true at tcsworldofwonders.com. Our good friend TC is giving a 10% discount to all monsters who put an order in this week. So be sure to check him out. Curt, you were talking about it. Caleb, I want to get your thoughts about it, about the pie in the sky kind of potential in ceiling for Colson Montgomery. He's currently, I believe, am I correct, Curt, projected to make the Sox in 2024 if he keeps progressing. Mm-hmm. Where do you both see him in terms of being the future, a future mainstay of the White Sox infield?
I'll start, and I'll just say that the sample size was small. Yeah. I know that Chris Getz, and I talked with Getz, and then I talked with Colson. We took away the batting average. We took away all the stats and said, just go out there, get 4 at-bats, times that by 25 games, and let's see if you can get comfortable. An older, more experienced guy like Brian Ramos and Luis Mieses, they're just older, more experienced guys, so they didn't have any. They didn't have any trouble acclimating themselves to the higher pitching. And Colson, as he had told the media, he was starting to run out of gas. He was getting tired. He had never played that many games before. So I just want to make sure that I don't I'm not putting him in the White Sox Hall of Fame. White Sox actually have former Baron Tim Anderson, who I love, and he's an all-star and a batting champ and everything else. So I can't say Colson's going to replace Tim, but I will say, Montgomery's physically, You're looking at a 6'5" guy who's going to fill out.
Size for shortstop.
And he's, he's definitely going to get weight and add on muscle. And some say he might move out to third base, maybe even first base. I'd play him at short until he can't. But we got to come back a step or two because he's not ready for Chicago off that 3-week, 4-week period that we had. Okay. He's got to see a lot of pitches, and he's got to get his swing back, and he's got to get his confidence and start to dominate, which he was doing prior to that final promotion. He had dominated Winston, and he was, or Kannapolis rather, dominated 300 plus, and then was doing very well in Winston-Salem, and then just started getting tired. As he said, he had never played that many games before. So it was, it was pretty fairly obvious, and Chris Getz made it easier by telling everybody, hey, don't expect this to be a 3-week period where he's going to come in here like Luis Robert or Eloy or even Oscar Colas and just go, lights out and he's ready. Nope. They told us, and he told us, and it just about happened the way that it was forecasted.
Curt, this farm system, you've seen it come. You know how it goes. It goes in ebbs and flows. When a team gets hot at the major league level, when they feel like they've developed, their guys are ready, they launch. That's what happened with the White Sox about 3-4 years ago. The White Sox farm system now, if you look at it, is ranked anywhere from 25 to 30. At a lot of system analyst sites. But for you, what can you tell our audience about the health of the Sox farm system? Obviously, there's not guys we're going to see, I think, really contribute a lot this year, if I'm correct. But there is some really good young talent at both pitching and position wise that's not too far away outside of Coulson.
If you had asked me that question prior to August 24th, I probably wouldn't have had a good answer. But from the 24th on, I have a much better answer. And I will tell you that at every position, there is a guy who has a chance to be impact. We didn't even get into a guy like Duke Ellis, who's almost a throwaway, but I want you guys to remember that name. Perhaps the fastest guy I've ever seen in my life. Left-handed batter, went to Texas, and he came up, he wound up with about 50 some odd stolen bases combined last year. But if you ask me a position, second base, shortstop, third, catcher, first baseman, there is a legitimate hitter and prospect that the White Sox have in the farm system. And especially, and I guess the area that they're really proud of and stacked is the middle infield. There is a group of guys, 4 or 5 deep, between Charlotte, Birmingham, and even coming up and pushing from Winston-Salem. Now, I'm going to be honest with everybody. The pitching struggled all year, and the guys that we had, and then new guys that we had, it was a struggle all year. That is something that, look, you don't have to tell Chris Getz, hey man, we need some pitching in this organization. I mean, it's you joke about it down in the dugout area. Believe me, and that's why Noah was number 1 this past year, drafted number 1. So they're starting to address, but the strength is definitely in the position player and the hitting, and then the weakness would be the pitching. And it doesn't mean there's nobody, and it doesn't mean that there's not going to be anybody breaks through. Sean Burke had a real nice finish with us, a number 3 pick, I believe, out of Maryland. Mm-hmm. And there's a guy, I'm giving you another name. It's Christian Mena, and I mentioned his name twice.
Yeah.
And you got to you look at his numbers, and you're like, he's terrible. First of all, he's 19. Second of all, he throws 2 pitches, fastball, upper 90s, and he's got the most wicked curveball, hard curveball / slider. That arm is magic. And that arm alone is the type that's going to project. So I don't want anybody to think, well, there's no pitching on the way. There is. It's behind the hitters, and we don't have the depth. I'll give you a great example, elongating this answer. The Huntsville, where the Trash Pandas, the Rocket City Trash Pandas, they were all pitching. The previous year, they drafted 20 pitchers, which had never been done before. So they had stud arms, and they filled their roster with free agents. Okay. So you can't have the best of both. There's nobody that has the best of both. You got to make trades. You make good signings. You got to develop. So for White Sox fans, I can name you a hitter at each position, all 9 on the field: catchers, center fielders, right fielders, first baseman. Doesn't matter. Pitching is going to take another year or two to get that. The key word is depth.
Speaking of that, could you talk to us a little bit about the coaching staff? Because I was reading, if I saw this right, Lorenzo Bundy, his first year this year as a manager, and Nicky Delmonico, who was here in Louisville, he played his last season. And I know my girlfriend works for the Louisville Bats, so she could tell you, and she told me that the players had a lot of respect for that guy. And I noticed he's the hitting coach. And I think it's very important, too, that you have the right managers in place, especially coming up from Double-A to Single-A and being put in the right positions and the right set of knowledge when they're going in for the start of the season.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention what we lost, and that is Justin Jerschley. Probably will be the youngest manager in all of AAA. That's 31, 32 years old. He did a terrific job, and he did a job in 21 and 22. Those are the years coming off of COVID. Rosters were a mess. Bullpens were a mess. Pitching was a mess. And yet he was a winner, and he kept everybody going. Now, Lorenzo, I've never met him before. However, I've been in ball long enough that I have heard for 30 years that this is a great guy, a baseball guy. And he'll bring an instant amount of respect because of where he's been. He's been a big league coach on and off for quite some time. So that's instant credibility there. When you talk about Nicky Delmonico, you're talking about one of my all-time favorite Birmingham Barons. The charisma, the pizzazz, and the ability. One of the greatest locker room leaders I've ever been around with the Barons, and willed his way, hit his way to the big leagues. At the end, injuries, cut him short. I think it was the shoulder. Otherwise, he probably would be playing instead of hitting. And we're over the moon to have him come back. And then if White Sox fans certainly should remember the story about Danny Farquhar, who collapsed on the mound going into the dugout. And this was 3 years ago. And Danny is our pitching coach. And so here's a guy who's not far removed from MLB. I met him briefly 2 years ago when he came to Birmingham to kind of get his apprenticeship started, and just an absolute incredible guy. And everybody has to look the story up because he just about died, had an aneurysm, and was lucky to be alive. He did actually come back, pitch a little bit in the minor leagues, and now is the White Sox loved him, so he is the Barons' new pitching coach.
That's awesome. Well, hey, Curt, I want to ask you real quick. As we get amp up for the start of the season, right? We'll be covering about 3 to 4 games here a week, depending on how the week schedule works. And I'm just trying to get a sense of your thoughts on spring training. I know it's a wild one with the baseball classic going on.
Yeah,
I feel like half our team is on 12 different teams right now.
Right.
But one that stands out is Oscar Colas. And what are your thoughts about when he was in the minors and then his chances of breaking with the big league team?
It's almost 3 straight years, Caleb, where we have seen, and it doesn't take a guy who's been in baseball like me for 30 years. You see Eloy Jimenez, you see Luis Robert, and you see Oscar Colas, and they're just different. That's the way I put it. They get off the bus, they're different. They get in the batting cage, and they're different. Well, Oscar's next. You had the other 2 guys, I wasn't wrong because those guys, when healthy, Luis and Eloy are 300 hitters with 30 home runs and 100 RBIs. Oscar is every bit the offensive threat that those other guys are. In fact, they're perhaps is even slightly ahead, and I'll tell you why. He at his early stage of baseball, and he's 23, 24, but he hasn't been in the States but for a year. I remember his first at bat with the shift that is no longer allowed, but he hit the ball to left field, and that was really pleasing. And although, like every player that plays the game now, you get homer happy when you hit a couple, you pull a couple. When he gets out of the homer happy in the hero ball, the only way to get out is when he gets himself out. The pitchers don't get him out. Okay, he wins the count. He's able to foul off as many pitches as he wants. And really, the fun part is that he's so thrilled to be playing the game, so happy to be playing the game. And guys, I talk about this a lot. I don't think that we, the panel that's on this Zoom right now, understand what it is like to grow up and live in Cuba and be under their rules and regulations. And every single one that I've talked to, whether through an interpreter or just my own little Spanglish, they come over for freedom, and Oscar's a guy that just is loving life right now, just enjoying it. And that helps his transition rather to becoming a big leaguer. And he's done nothing in spring training to hurt his chances of being the opening day right fielder.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And
It's
then
just whether you want the clock to start,
Oh, when you want the clock to start, as far as like options and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not worried about it, then put him in right field, because if he struggles early, I'm telling you, he'll make up for it, and he will get hot. And he's, like I said, he gets himself out. I mean, obviously the pitching is going to be better, and I'm not telling you he's the American League Rookie of the Year, Julio Rodriguez type, but he's just an offensive threat. Now, defensively, he's pretty good too. The offense is just so superior. Defense, he could play. I would put him in the corners. We had him in center a few times, but there are better center fielders. But put him in right. He gets to every ball that he needs to get to, and he's got a good, strong throwing arm as well.
Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we look forward to seeing him. Hopefully, he'll make the opening day roster. If not, I think he'll be down with. I wanted to touch on Cespedes, and I think he'll probably break with AAA this year. And
I think
and if
so.
you have thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I think Joelke would be the first to tell you that he didn't put up the numbers that he was hoping to. And he had come off a pretty good spring training coming into 2022. And I think that mentally he was thinking, hey, I should have started the season in Charlotte. I think he was bothered by that. He puts pressure on himself to put up these numbers. You can't do a broadcast without talking about his half-brother, Yoenis. So, and he's trying to, the cool thing about him is he's trying to identify himself as his own guy. And he would tell all the media all the time, he goes, that's Yoenis, I'm Joelke. So he wanted to, do that. But when you look at, you look at the numbers, the expectations were really, really high. And what happened was he puts pressure on himself to hit home runs. So the strikeouts were enormous. That would be the one area. Again, take those strikeouts and put contact there. He can do amazing things on the bases, on the field, and in center field. But the old adage about you can't steal first base. And if you're swinging and if you're leading off like he should have, and you have 100 and some odd strikeouts, you're not doing it. You're not getting the job done.
Absolutely. Curt, I know you got to go really quickly. A year ago, we were talking about the White Sox as a potential World Series champion. Bob Nightingale, the USA Today, predicted that the Sox would win the Fall Classic. This year, obviously, it's a much different scenario. The expectations are much more grounded following last year's 81 and 81 season. For White Sox fans in general out there, what do you think they can expect from these 2023 Sox? I mean, obviously there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, but what would be a realistic expectation? Are all the pieces here, if this team can stay healthy, to be able to shake off last year and contend for the AL Central title?
Well, the division is really, it's anybody who wants it, who Minnesota, Cleveland, and Chicago. I was wrong about Detroit. I thought Detroit put together a pretty good team, and they did not on paper. But I would tell you what, the absolute key for the White Sox, like any other club, is health. And they have got to, now remember, they're already starting with Liam Hendricks unavailable. But they have got to get a full season on the field from Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert and Tim Anderson. Okay. Now, I will guarantee you this. If those three guys have 500 or more at bats, they play in 150 games, 145 games, then the White Sox will contend. To what level, I don't know. I think they're going to be at the back end of the rotation. And now with their closer, fighting cancer, you still can't say that they're going to win, but I will guarantee you they will score a lot of runs and they will be a tough out if and only if those three guys give you the 140, 150 games and 500 plus at bats. Otherwise, it's just going to be like last year. Mix and match and hope that you get hot, and then you're going to get cold, then you're going to get hot, and, like inconsistent.
Absolutely. That is half the battle. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the Hall of Fame broadcaster for your Birmingham Barons, starting his 32nd year with the Barons next month. Home opener April 11th. Catch Curt all year long at barons.com. Listen along to see the next great White Sox stars. Curt, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you for your time. Wishing you a great and successful season with the Barons this spring and summer.
Well, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed being with you guys, talking ball. I mean, that in itself, like, just shut off the Zoom and let's just talk ball for the next 5 hours. I'd be as happy as can be. So
I think we all would be.
so thank you, and check in with me during the season and check up on our progress.
Absolutely, we will, Curt. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Curt Bloom, the Hall of Fame voice of the Birmingham Barons. Also, you can catch him on ESPN calling college football and college baseball. Curt, thank you so much, my friend. Hey, you know what, Caleb? You know what, Matt? We all know this. Winter's almost in a rearview mirror, but this is no time of the year to be without a safe, reliable vehicle. If you need a trusted friend to find the best car for your budget, fellas, look no further than Budget Cars in Michigan City, Indiana. Dustin Johnson's team will get you back on the road in style. Fellas, it's 3 generations serving friends and family since 1972. Call Budget Cars at 1-219-874-5180 or 219-873-3988 and get back on the road fast, ladies and gentlemen. And as we pivot now from White Sox talk, let's talk to the hardest working sports in America, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if this guy has gotten an hour of sleep over the last 5 crazy days. Please welcome to the Monsters of the Madhouse, our good friend from Windy City Gridiron, their Ace Bears beat man, Robert Schmitz is joining the Madhouse. Robert, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Perfect.
Clear. Let's start off with, how much sleep have you got over the last 5 days?
Probably a collective, I'd say, it's not horrible. It's like 25 hours. I've had worse. When I was especially first starting out, it was all-nighter after all-nighter. Sure. But thankfully, we switch up the work schedule a little bit. You get a part-time job that's not as intensive, right? And you get better at going through film, right? Yeah. Which took some reps, but you get to a point where you can set up a podcast studio in your car and hit a show, and it gets a little faster, right?
Yeah. Yep. This is not your first rodeo. Hey, I know you've gotten this question a million times over the last 5 days. For all your years covering the Bears, all your years following the Bears, has this been the craziest news-heavy 5 days of roster transactions that you can remember for this franchise?
Oh, man. You want to talk about crazy. So that 2018 offseason was absolutely wild, which is not to say we're not there yet. The problem is that we're not done, right? We don't have the entire picture. Last year, it was Allen Robinson and Taylor Gabriel and Bobby Massey, and not last year, this is 2018. And the Khalil Mack trade was an absolute jaw dropper. Like the Bears, That's, I think, the biggest problem, which isn't to pivot too hard to answer a question you didn't ask, but a lot of people are acting like free agency is over, and we're barely out of wave one if we're out of wave one. Like, there's a lot of guys left out there, and the Bears have $50 million in cap space. They're going to use it. It's just a matter of on what and how. And we can complain till the cows come home, don't get me wrong, about prioritizing $25 million in linebacking spending before they address the defensive line. But the question that then you got to ask is, okay, what were we looking for from the defensive line in free agency? And was Javon Hargrave were we just excited about a guy like Mike McGlinchey because it would show heavy investment? Or did we think Mike McGlinchey was really good? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I thought he was I thought he was overpaid. Even though I thought he was a good player, but I think I'm happy that we didn't end up paying that amount of money for him.
To use an example, Matt, let me build off of exactly what you're talking about, right? Like, I think most of us Bears fans had talked ourselves into a guy like Javon Hargrave and a guy like Mike McGlinchey, right? Mm-hmm. And Hargrave, it just got 4 years, $84 million, and he's already on the wrong side of 30. The moment Akeem Hicks crossed 30, he got hurt, and he was never the same, at least not quite the same ever again, with a guy like Mike McGlinchey. Honestly, Matt, best case scenario, on a scale or like on a ranking of 1 to 32, how good is Mike McGlinchey? Best case scenario.
32 being the highest, you think? Or
32. So, honest, like for best right tackle in football to worst. What do you think best case scenario Mike McGlinchey compares to the rest of the league?
I would say not average, but maybe just above average. I'm not going to put him at the best, but I would say, he's a good player. He's a good player. Don't get me wrong. He's better than he's better than a lot of other stuff out there. But at the same time, I don't think I wouldn't put him on the top 10 list. But
like you're saying, Caleb, we're talking about a top 12 tackle with an injury problem that didn't have the best year last year. So if you get the not as great version of Mike McGlinchey, you've handed out 3 guaranteed years, $50 guaranteed million to somebody who doesn't quite fix the problem, right? And that's not, look, here's the hard part, guys, right? The Bears ultimately have to address a lot of these positions in the draft. We can do better than starting Travis Gibson as our, first or second string edge right now. We can do better than still needing Mike Pennell to play a reserve role on the offensive line. We can do better than Larry Borum as the right tackle. I'm not pretending that Ryan Poles is any way, shape, or form done just yet. But to suggest that some of the guys that I think we got very excited about were the absolute only solution possible at the position ignores that you draft the best players on your team, generally speaking. And free agency is great at helping you fill holes, but if the Bears really want to, I guess I look at this and I think to myself, a guy like Paris Johnson does a lot more for this team than a guy like Caleb McGarry, right? Who I'm not a huge fan of, but that's neither here nor there. And yes, there's an element of this that I understand is me being in a good mood, talking about a team that I can say they're not done until everybody's picked over and they didn't sign anybody. We all have had that feeling where we go, something's got to be in the works. Something's got to be in the works. Okay, so we got hosed. Nothing was in the works, but we're not there yet. So I'll keep the smile on my face and march on.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about those filling holes. If we could go, Robert, with you through all these free agent acquisitions we've made so far, if we could give us your take on them, and then where do you think the ceiling is for these guys? Let's start with DeMarcus Walker. You were talking about how we needed help on the edge. We get him on a 3-year deal. He's coming off a career year. Is he just going to be a complementary piece for this new look defense, or is this the edge rusher that will be an impact guy for us?
In a perfect world, DeMarcus Walker is part of your defensive line rotation. Edge 2, maybe even edge 3 if your team's really stacked out. He can play a little bit of 3-tech, but you got to remember, he never logged a game in Tennessee last year with more than 50% of the snaps in the game. So he was used as a rotational piece, and he had a really nice year rushing the passer. He's got a little bit of juice. Is he better? Let's put it this way. Is he better than Armon Watts? Absolutely. Is he better than Al-Qadim Muhammad? Absolutely. But if he's the best player on your defensive line, you're in a hole. And that's where he is right now, but I'm not going to hold that against Walker specifically. I think as a one-gap run defender, that the kind of guy that Eberflus likes, he's going to upgrade the defensive line. The problem is that he's one guy out of what's likely needing to be, what do you think, guys, 5 or 6? Like, you need a band of brothers on the defensive line, and he's just one guy.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the prize, in my opinion, of this, Robert. Tremaine Edmonds, 24 years old, hasn't missed a game, 5 consecutive seasons of 100 sacks or more, a 2-time All-Pro. Is this potentially the next great Chicago Bears linebacker?
I'll tell you that he's going to bring up a lot of Urlacher comparisons, and I'm not trying. So the main thing that I'm trying to talk out before it happens is that there are going to be a lot of Bears fans that are going to watch this guy, 6'5", 250, moves outrageously fast, and they're going to be stunned at how non-violent he is when taking on blockers, which reminds me of the Urlacher conversation, right? He is awesome in coverage, but they don't show coverage on the broadcast. He is awesome side to side, which you only see sometimes. But when it comes to playing downhill and hitting somebody, it's not his game. I'll tell you that I think personally, let's be honest, Roquan Smith was never a downhill linebacker either. Certainly no thumper. So the Bears get more length, they get more size, and they get just as much coverage capability out of a guy that they basically signed on free agency. You are talking to probably one of the people on the Bears beat that likes Roquan the least and liked Roquan the least throughout his time in Chicago. So I promise I'm not changing my stance just because he left Chicago. I was always worried about paying a guy like him $20 million. And let me be honest, like $18 million for Tremaine Edmonds is a little expensive for my taste, maybe a little bit. But this is Matthew Eberflus. He's drafted 3 day 3 linebackers in Indianapolis, and he was going to draft another day 2 linebacker had he gotten the chance in Chicago if we didn't throw the money at Edmonds. So is that a great reason to pay somebody? You tell me, but I can ride with it. This is the head coach's dream. Length. He's going to clog up the middle of the field. The Bears are trying to prioritize making passing harder, and he's much better at covering those underneath routes than either Nick Morrow or Jack Sanborn in their current state. It's a huge upgrade. It remains to be seen whether they can get a defensive line good enough to keep him clean within the run game, but so that I can help you segue, that's what TJ Edwards is for.
And you read my mind, my friend. Now, you want to talk about value. $19 million, what, $11 million guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I think, of all the moves that RP made on Monday, Robert, this was maybe his best steal.
Right. I mean, to me, when you average out the linebackers, I feel a lot better about both of them because TJ Edwards is just as capable a player as Tremaine Edmonds in his own way. This is a guy, I'm not a huge comp person, but comps help everybody visualize what a player looks like without you having to grind 2 hours of film. Think about what Danny Trevathan looked like in the 2018 defense. Extremely quick diagnoser of plays, moves instinctively to where the ball ends up going, fits the run a lot better than a guy his size and his speed at 230 pounds should. Which of these two guys, between the 250 pounds, 6'5", 34-inch arm Tremaine Edmonds versus 230 pounds, 6'0", I think he's got 32-inch arms, Edwards, is going to take on an offensive tackle better? Believe it or not, it's the latter. There's something in the water with these Wisconsin linebackers, and the Bears have brought home the hometown kid. He comes on a way cheaper salary than he should, and it won't surprise me to see him playing will linebacker for Chicago and doing a pretty decent job of it, again, assuming that he doesn't have offensive linemen running at him full steam.
Exactly. Fellas, and Matt, Caleb, after this question, feel free to chime in with Robert again, guys. We are talking with the ace reporter for Windy City Gridiron, Robert Schmitz. He was all over everything that has happened in these wild and crazy past 96 hours for the Chicago Bears. The most controversial move that me of the week, in my opinion, the move to get Travis Homer from the Seahawks, parting with David Montgomery. Obviously, Robert, it doesn't cost any money. It's kind of a flyer, my realness with Travis. But was it the right move to part with someone who was as dependable and really epitomized what it meant to be a Chicago Bear like David Montgomery?
So the signing's timing, let's be honest, like from a PR perspective, couldn't have been worse. Right? Because it makes it look like to everybody that the Bears replaced David Montgomery with Homer. But if you ask me, they're replacing Tristan Ebner, like the special teams back and the third guy on the depth chart, and they've just blatantly left the number 1 spot open. Now, David Montgomery is everybody's favorite running back for a bazillion reasons. Great personality, he looks like a Hall of Famer when he's breaking tackles. But I think the hard part for a lot of people to see, because you really don't see it from the sideways broadcast angle, is how often David Montgomery's lack of a first step and lack of foot speed kept him from getting through a hole that Khalil Herbert could get through. I know this is a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow, and I promise I'm not lying to you. Khalil Herbert didn't just get better play calls. I mean, the fact that Herbert could stretch this offense to roughly, I think at his best, it was almost 6.5 yards per carry, while David Montgomery scraped and scrapped for 4.1 yards per carry, is no accident. And I love David Montgomery. I think he's one of the best receiving backs in football, but he's not known as that. He's known as a feature back, a 3-down bell cow that you want to hand the ball to all the time. And it takes away from what I think was his best usage, where you dump the ball off to him. And let's be honest, guys, he's a wizard. He would turn 3rd and 15s into consistent first downs because the first guy to try to tackle him never could. So is it going to be easy to replace David Montgomery? Of course not. But if it helps Bears fans sleep at night, I have a feeling that Getsy, who came from the Green Bay regime that drafted A.J. Dillon in the 2nd round and paid the snot out of Aaron Jones, Ryan Poles, who came from a Kansas City regime that spent a 1st-round pick on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Ian Cunningham, who came from an Eagles regime that spent a 2nd-round pick on Miles Sanders. If you want a running back to cheer for, you're going to get your chance. Because whether it's Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama, whether it's Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA, whether it's the ever-popular Tyjae Spears out of Tulane, whether it's Zach Evans out of Ole Miss, pick your favorite running back that'll be there around pick 61 to 65. I don't know about you guys. I get a funny feeling looking at the fact that the Bears have 3 picks within 12 spots, thinking a running back makes a lot of sense there.
You know, I'm glad you're talking about David Montgomery too, because I've been talking about it here with us now for the past month or so, that I thought this year's free agent class in general was weak.
Yes.
I thought that you got to be very careful, because we're all excited as Bears fans because we got all this money and stuff and we got to go spend. But the more I really looked into it, I'm like, we got to be very careful here, which I'm glad, because Poles looks like he's made the right decisions here, and it kind of reflects on what he's signed so far. But you're starting to see some of these other players, like Juju Smith today for the Patriots, I thought got way overpaid. Good player, but I think he was overpaid. The guy Jones that we were kind of looking at from Denver going to Seattle, I thought he got a lot more money than I think we were going to pay. Is that your sentiment feeling? Now, I think David Montgomery and Swift could be a great backfield in Detroit. I think those two are going to complement great with each other. But look at the running backs. The running backs necessarily did not get overpaid, I don't think. I think the market for the running backs this year, I saw what Sanders got paid earlier today for the Panthers. And I didn't see, like, they didn't break the bank as far as that goes, to what your point is to go draft a running back in the draft. So what is your overall thoughts in free agency so far that you've seen?
So the funny part about a lot of this is that, first of all, there's always a human element, right? We got to remember, okay, well, how did Jacksonville land all these free agents last year? Well, this time last year, we were laughing at Jacksonville for handing out deals that were roughly, $3 to $5 million per player over what they should have been on a year-to-year basis. I mean, you got to pay players to come to a bad team, and Ryan Poles does not seem willing to do that, and I don't actually know if that's a problem. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's without a doubt the right decision. I don't know. But I think it's easy to say it is the wrong decision, and then the teams line up in week 1 in 2023, and especially they line up in 2024, and suddenly you're looking at teams with dead cap hits because they had to cut the free agent that they spent so much money on, and it just doesn't look as good, right? Like, I'm with you, Matt, where it's easy to say we should hand Draymond Jones whatever he wants, but then you look at the fact that the team that ultimately won him, Matt, you've seen that contract just like I have.
Yeah.
He got 1 year guaranteed. What's a player with that much hype behind him only getting 1 guaranteed year? It was $18 million on a $16 million AAV. Starts to make you ask the question, we like to breeze over injuries, but he had a season-ending hip injury that kept him out the last 6 games. Do we know for sure that that's resolved, because the low guarantee that he got from Seattle suggests it might not be. And it's easy this time of year, truly, to say that guy's going to be a stud. I cannot believe we didn't pay for him. But we don't know what a lot of these free agents are going to look like. And generally speaking, throughout my entire life, if you win free agency, you lose the regular season. Like, you'll pick up some wins, but you don't tend to win championships after spending $1 bazillion in free agency without also hitting big in the draft. So I think the best thing that I can say about a lot of these guys, because we haven't gotten to Nate Davis, who's one of my favorite signings in the class.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you haven't asked me about DJ Moore, which is a rabbit out of a hat trade. But and I could go deeper into any of them. It's more to say that I tend to think, so Matt, let's use an example. Let's talk about Jawan Taylor. We all know who Jawan Taylor is, right? Former right tackle from Jacksonville, never played left tackle a day in his college or NFL life, to my understanding. And now he just got $20 million for, I think it's 4 years, at least 4, but $60 million guaranteed to play a position he's never played before at one of the most competitive positions in football against some of the best edge rushers in football, and he has to switch sides to do it. Like, you look at a contract like that and you think to yourself, well, it's the Chiefs. They're the Super Bowl champions. How could they possibly be wrong? There are a lot of ways that deal could go sideways. And if that's the going rate of a left tackle that's never played the position before, then I don't blame Poles for thinking we can draft someone better because we have a top 10 pick. And we'll have to see. I mean, if Poles leaves offensive line completely unaddressed from now until June, that's a huge issue. If all we end up getting is a second-round tackle that doesn't fall, you end up with somebody like Matthew Bergeron that you're hoping and praying can function in your outside zone scheme like you want him to, then that's a pretty risky bet. But we're not there yet. All we know is that the Bears haven't tied up all-star money in average, best-case scenario, just like you said, Caleb, best-case scenario above average players, right? Because while you can totally lock down a premium position with a name, the question is whether that name is going to bring the game with him on Sundays, like somebody whose name you don't know yet, but come 2 years, like Stephon Diggs, to use an example. Nobody had heard of Braxton Jones. It's not to say that these guys are easy to find. It's to say that they can be found. And especially with, I think it's right now 4 picks in the top 65. There's ways to address a lot of these positions. It may not all come at once, but frankly, we got $50 million more cap to spend, and we can't rule out trades, right? I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not going to pretend to, right? But they've got to be some teams that, as they start to suddenly realize free agency isn't going their way, that Caleb Williams and potentially, I'll say it, tanking for a quarterback that legendary becomes appealing, that they may want to shed whatever players are really good on their roster. Best way to do that is going to be to trade for them. So we saw Stephon Gilmore on the move. We saw Darren Waller on the move. We've seen multiple other players get on the move with some of these trades. It makes me wonder if Ryan Poles is doing deals in the back door right now that just haven't come to fruition, but that's all speculation, right?
Yeah. We are talking with the man you should be following, ladies and gentlemen, the man in the know who is covering every inch of the Chicago Bears wildly crazy offseason. He's Robert Schmitz. Follow him, Windy City Gridiron. Robert, you talked about it, the rabbit out of the hat, one of the biggest trades in Bears history last Friday. Can you tell me through your research on that? Take us through that. Obviously, DJ Moore is the centerpiece. He's what made that happen. And really, is he once Carolina committed to putting him as the centerpiece of the package, is that what tipped the hand for Ryan to say, okay, this is the deal I'm going to take?
I have to think a little bit of everything. I mean, what you got to remember is that this is just totally me getting an impression, but I think Poles wanted to fish out as much draft capital as he possibly could, but I have a feeling he was always looking at 9 as a landing spot. I know I was. I mean, for the last probably month and a half, it's not a horn toot. It's more to say that when you looked at this draft, you saw that if you could go down to 9, you could get more than one first-round pick. You could get some major draft assets, but you had to be willing to go down. And there was always going to be a quarterback needy team at 9, 11, 8, 7 that was going to be willing to part with some of that premium draft capital to allow you to do it. The question was, would you get more mileage out of going to 2 and then going to 9, or would you get more mileage out of going straight to 9? And the got everybody really, really excited about a lot of these quarterbacks. So excited, I wonder if Ryan Poles or at least thought to himself, hey, if these teams realize that they can just stand pat and take any of the top 3 and be just about as well off as the rest, I'm going to lose my leverage for number 1. And so with Carolina offering, obviously we could look at the fact that the over the cap chart has it at 130% win. The Jimmy Johnson chart has it as a 15% premium, which is great for these kinds of trades. But I'll be honest, the player fit, let's assume, we can't say this for sure, but let's assume that the other trade offers that we've heard about implied a young receiver, right? And so when you look at DJ Moore versus Michael Pittman versus whatever receiving option, maybe it was Darren Waller, that the Raiders could come up with, I think Moore's the clear best player. So now you get a future pick that could be really high, because the Panthers without DJ Moore could be really bad on offense. I mean, especially if they're trading away, because they traded away their second. They traded away their, obviously they put their first into number 1. So assuming that they take a quarterback, why wouldn't they? They'll have a rookie quarterback. Traditionally, they're not very good. A poor skill group, whoever they pick in the 30s, and some guys on defense, but not enough to carry the team to some massive amount of wins. So Ryan Poles ends up, in my opinion, getting a deal that has a chance to work out for both parties. It should. We're not trying to ruin Carolina's franchise forever. Everybody wants a trade to be a double win. But at the same time, I can't help thinking that while you gloss over you asked me to analyze the picks are great. Who doesn't love the picks? But the Bears roster is in deep. They need those picks just to float. Where what really matters here is that DJ Moore's game reminds me a lot of the way that Chris Olave got used at Ohio State. He succeeds a lot outside the numbers and in the intermediate and deep areas of the field. And what a coincidence, outside the numbers, intermediate, deep, all these are hallmarks of where Justin Fields wants to throw the football. And so having a receiver that can get open in all the areas that not only does Fields like, but that Mooney's not as strong. Mooney can play the short and the intermediate area, and he can get open deep, but he's not the deep ball artist that you'll see Moore is. If you're following my Twitter and watching some of the clips that I'll post for you, DJ Moore gets open like crazy deep. And Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, in a stunning turn of events, really struggled to get the ball down the field to where it needed to be so that Moore could collect the production that his route running earned. And he's in particular, to me, if there is a crown jewel move so far, sure, you'd say it's the trade. It's specifically Moore, because if I directly compare Moore, I'd say he's twice as valuable as Pittman and probably about 5 times as valuable as Waller. When you look at the youth, you look at the contract, you look at the value it brings to the Bears. DJ Moore was probably going to end up worth at least what A.J. Brown was, a first and a third in a direct trade, maybe even a first and a second given his age. So I'm stoked that Poles was able to reel him in. And without him, this free agency class looks a lot different. But with him, the Bears got the best receiving option that they could have possibly dreamed up. And now instead of saying that the Bears have to take JSN and no other option fits, the Bears have some options at the top of the draft. And I love having options.
Yeah, absolutely. And DJ Moore already connected with his quarterback, Robert. News from the United Center that Justin Fields, DJ Moore, and Chase Claypool all taking in a Bulls game together. It's great to see those 3 getting on the same page very soon. You mentioned how unpredictable the next 5 weeks is going to be. If you had to call it, can you give me a two-part answer here? What should be Ryan Poles' next free agent move, and what do you think will be his next free agent?
So if I got to choose, a lot of people are going to say defensive line. Honestly, if the team's going to have a strugglesome spot, I sure hope it's not on offensive line, right? Justin Fields absolutely has to have a stable platform to prove what he is and what he isn't next year, whether we like it or not. And so I think personally, whether it's to sign a guy like Isaac Seumalo, who's a flat-out good guard, kick Tevin Jenkins to right tackle so that you have more stability on the offensive line, or you go out there, you sign like a Cameron Fleming, you sign that right tackle whose name escapes me from the Raiders. You get a guy who can play tackle and can play tackle at a decent level, but he's not going to be break the bank expensive, and he's not going to stop you from drafting a better lineman if you get the opportunity. That move is the move I would make next, because again, if the defensive line sucks, so be it. You can not like I could pretend to you that we could work around a horrible defensive line, but it's going to be tough. I'll be honest with you. I just didn't expect the Bears to go from we don't even know if Tevin Jenkins is the answer we want him to be to a playoff contender with no holes, right? This is going to take time. That's what the 2 first-round picks are for. So what I would do if I was them is don't prioritize defense so much that the offense ends up with a quarterback having to pull rabbits out of his hat, because we watched that. It's tough. It leads to injuries. It leads to flashes in the pan. I want the Bears to be able to build something sustainable and stable on the offense. DJ Moore helps them do that. And a move that maybe they do or don't make it tight end down the road helps them do that. The Nate Davis move helps them do that. But they needed more than just Nate Davis. And so I'd love to see another body come through.
Absolutely. Robert Schmitz, ladies and gentlemen. Follow him on Twitter. Follow him on Windy City Gridiron. Matt, Caleb, fellas, you got any questions for Robert before we let him go?
What was your overthought as we sit here? We talk a lot about the Bears, about the and I look at the whole now of the NFC North,
right?
Because I think it's going to be it's a lot in flux right now. I mean, we saw the Aaron Rodgers stuff today, which is always making me laugh. I think to me, because we could sit here and say teams got weaker, but to me, I think the 2 biggest things in the North was the Lions keeping their offensive coordinator, who I think is a hell of a coach. And now he's got Montgomery, and he's got those weapons another year to work with them. I think they're going to be more dangerous. I like the 2 cornerbacks they got, Mosley and Sutton, I think is going to really help that team out a lot. Yeah. And they got draft capital. Like, they're going to be drafting pretty high too. And I think the Vikings, they got Brian Flores, who I think is a hell of a coach too. And they moved on for some of their aging players because they know they got to get a little bit younger. And I think they are. And I think with Flores there, I think if they put the right players in place, I still think they're going to be very good. So what is your overall take?
I think you're nailing it. I mean, you get the impression that the Vikings are attempting to prune a little bit, right? That's the word I've always where they're going to take some short-term losses. And you know what? It may not be a great year for them, just because when you cut guys like Zadarius Smith, when you cut guys across the roster like Adam Thielen, you have to draft really, really well, or the team's going to take a slight step back. But step backs aren't always bad. I mean, like we saw with the Bears this year, a high pick can completely turn your franchise around depending on how you use it. And Kwesi
in Minnesota, cannot believe that escaped me for even a moment. He could very well be thinking that. He comes from an analytics-oriented background. I tend to doubt that he is a win-at-all-cost guy. And frankly, the fact that he recognizes that the Vikings were a 13-win team that probably overperformed is news that I wish I didn't read, because it would have been way cooler as a Bears fan for them to commit to the core, or at least think that they had a core going, and end up burning out even more cataclysmically down the road. But, Matt, it doesn't seem like we're going that way. No. I feel like Detroit is also building something really, really sustainable, and that is not something I'm a huge fan of. I mean, like you're talking about, they got some sweet coaching upgrades. They added a lot of defensive backs, and they needed a lot of defensive backs. They've got a young defensive line. They've got 2 top 20 picks. So what are they going to do, and how are they going to be able to build from here? I mean, right now, they're on the right path. They're certainly a year ahead of the Bears. And Bears fans like me could easily tote the fact that Justin Fields looks awesome and that we're really excited about him. But when you've got Jared Goff, who, yeah, I'll make fun of Jared Goff too plenty of times, but the day Fields throws for 4,800 yards in a year is the day that I will give him some credit that Goff ought to earn. And so they've got, like you're talking about, it may be a year or two before Detroit loses some steam. It's not easy, like we saw in Buffalo, to go from offensive coordinator that absolutely knows his stuff to whoever the second guy is behind him. But Ben Johnson right now gives Detroit their best shot at a real run. I mean, you got to remember, this is a team that hasn't won a playoff game in, do we know how long? Like, it's been a while. in
Yeah.
Motown.
20-something years.
So
Detroit, like
their
now
side
too.
may very well be set on, let's just win a playoff game. Well, I'm sure it's going to be Super Bowl, but their fans are thinking, let's at least win a playoff game while the Bears are on the come up. And honestly, because I'm a fan of football, I hope that everybody beats the Packers, because wouldn't that be great? And that the Vikings and the Lions and the Bears share some phenomenal football games over the next 3 years.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a new look in the NFC North. To Aaron Rodgers, we bid you farewell, good sir, without question. Hey, Robert, we cannot thank you enough for stopping in, talking with us. You're as good as there is in the game, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot emphasize enough. Follow Robert on Twitter. Check him out at Windy City Gridiron. He's all over the most important Chicago Bears offseason in a generation. Robert, my friend, thank you. You have a great night. Thanks again for everything you do.
You're too
Yeah,
kind.
crush
Thank
it,
you
Robert.
so much for having me.
Thanks, man.
My pleasure, Robert. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been an action-packed adventure this Wednesday night. Wow, can it get any bigger? Friends, it can. Because next week, one of the biggest names in recent Chicago Bears history, one of our all-time favorites, coming to the Monsters, the All-Pro Tommy Harris. Be here or be square, folks, next Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. It's been wonderful. That is the quintessential football fan, Matt Cooper. Check him out, Q103.1 FM in Louisville. Also on the mix in Birmingham. Coop, Caleb, this has been a wild night, great night. Thanks for both of you for joining us. Any final thoughts before we call the show, folks?
No, man. Just follow our Sox on USA Baseball or wherever the heck they're playing. Team Cuba. Watch the World Baseball Classic, and we'll see you on opening day.
After I know we've been talking so much football here, but just to talk about baseball, I'm ready for baseball. I know the free agency's fun and the draft's fun, but I'm all in baseball right now. I'm in White Sox mode, and talking to Curt earlier just got me more excited, and I'm ready for opening day and watching baseball and going out to games and traveling to different stadiums. And I think a lot of us are like you are, Cleat, with the Cubs, and same with you with the White Sox.
Yeah, amen. And I'm sure, Caleb, you feel the same way. It's just, it's not only a sign of spring, but it just makes you feel good. Get out in the sun with a hot dog, a beer, your girl, just watching the great American pastime. And, Caleb, you bring up a good point. Folks, check out this World Baseball Classic. 9 o'clock tonight, Tim Anderson and Team USA look to advance to the quarterfinals against Colombia. It's pretty simple math, fellas. Win in, we're in. That game will be on Fox Sports 1. But yeah, so many White Sox players fueling Team USA's run at this World Baseball Classic. And hey guys, I cannot wait to be hopefully out with both of you out at a ball game where we can live the dream together sometime. So
make it happen, man.
Absolutely, you betcha, Coop. Hey fellas, I tell you what, if your taste buds need to enjoy ice cream in a whole new exciting way, try Serendipity Ice Cream Parlor, which is Chicagoland's most fun and hottest new ice cream parlor. It has ultra appetizing specialty grilled cheese sandwiches also on the menu, located at 120 North Griffin Boulevard in Griffith, Indiana. It's always summer at Serendipity Ice Cream Parlor, now open 7 days a week. Ice cream has never been this delicious. For Captain Caleb James, for Matt the Coolman Cooper, folks, I'm Clete Campbell. It's been our honor and privilege talking sports with you. Please join us again next Wednesday night, 7:30. Tommy Harris will be right here on Monsters of the Madhouse, brought to you by Chicago Sports Podcast. Good night, everyone.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go. Hustle hard, hustle every single day. I'll be making moves till I'm buried in my grave. To the system, I don't wanna be a slave. I've been doing shit my way, or the highway. And in the driveway is a nice range. Cause I grind through the climb, I invite pain. You'll never hear me, bitch, nah, I don't complain. Just gotta flip the switch and you can go and obtain anything you want, anything you need. Your mind's got the key ingredient, it's belief. They're deceived with the negativity, but I just slide right by that energy. Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go.